Can a true Christian be depressed?
So I understand why we ask the question that way. Can a true Christian be depressed? But the premise behind the question is actually a little bit, maybe even indulgent.
Let me preface this by saying that it seems like our friend Dr. Pierre has his heart in the right place. But there's a lot here that needs to be addressed, so let's have a look. Hi, I'm Shannon Q, and I recently appeared on the Hammered Out podcast with my friend Suris the Skeptic and Ocean Keltoy to discuss religion being used as a substitution for treatment in clinical depression, and there's a link for that down below if you'd like to check it out. While we were preparing for that podcast, Suris shared this video with me, and I think it merits a response. The link to the original video is in the description, and it's titled, Can a True Christian Have Depression? Our guide on this journey is going to be Dr. Jeremy Pierre. Dr. Pierre is an associate professor of biblical counseling at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is also where he received his PhD. And while he seems genuine in his intent, I'd like to take a closer look at the message that he's delivering here.
So let me actually go a step further and say it's not just that negative emotions are a part of the Christian experience. I would actually argue, based on scripture, that negative emotions are necessary to the Christian experience. And the reason I can say this is because emotions, whether they're positive or negative, are always reflections of our evaluation of the situation around us. And so negative emotions means that we're negatively evaluating what's around us.
Negative emotions aren't always reflections of situational evaluations. They aren't always explicable at all in the context of stimuli and response. That issue aside, I'd like to address the line that Dr. Pierre is dancing on here, because this is really important going forward. The title of this video asks, Can Christians have depression? That has a very specific connotation. Here the doctor is playing pretty fast and loose with the colloquial day-to-day usage, where it's overextended to be a blanket term for any negative emotion in general. Now, remember that here, because later it's going to be important. Depression from a clinical perspective has very specific symptomology that includes physiological and mental affect. It goes beyond mere sadness and malaise in reaction to expectations not being met or poor situational evaluations. The doctor's lack of clarification is troubling to me. Contextually, based on the title, have depression, along with some of the things he says later on, it would be very easy to infer that he's speaking about clinical depression. However, he wavers between referencing general negative emotions and direct reference to clinical depression haphazardly, without clearly defining or differentiating the terms. So it's really important that I did that here.
And so as we move towards the question of depression, how is depression a right evaluation of life? Well, it's a right evaluation of life because we live in a broken and a fallen world.
In order to be charitable here, I am going to operate under the assumption that Dr. Pierre isn't speaking about clinical depression in this instance either, because if he were, this statement would be incredibly negligent. Telling someone afflicted with clinical depression that their feelings are an accurate and an expected situational response could reinforce and strengthen their symptoms. So let's certainly hope that that isn't what he means. Instead, let's assume that he's referencing general feelings of unhappiness that one may naturally encounter as they travel through life. Even so, this statement is troubling. Uncomfortable and unwelcome feelings are naturally going to emerge throughout life. I have no issue with the recognition that feeling them is okay and to be expected. Assigning them the label of depression and asserting that that is an accurate evaluation of life, however, I do hold some issue with, particularly when we have a look at why he's deemed it necessary to articulate this at all.
So Christians shouldn't necessarily feel guilty when they have depressed feelings, because in some ways, that's an accurate emotional response to a depressing situation of being in a broken world. I've counseled many folks who are from Christian circles that treat depression as a purely wrong thing. It's the wrong response when God loves you. Don't you believe in the joy of the Lord? They'll often hear things like that. And joy is a real thing, but joy isn't a simple replacement of depressive feelings in the Christian experience. It's not that you have either total joy or total depression, and therefore it's sort of a fighting match to which one rules. That's not how it works. Joy is not a replacement so much as an addition. I would even say a more strong and more authoritative addition to depression. Because what it is recognizing is, yes, this world is broken, but that's not the ultimately true thing. It's broken and God's going to fix it. And he's going to usher in for those who belong to him a world where there is no sorrow, nor crying, nor pain, nor death anymore, because these are the former things. That's Revelation chapter 21.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack here, so bear with me. To summarize my understanding of what Dr. Pierre is imparting here, he implies that depression is the natural default state of being. Joy exists as an addition, and it is real, but because of the state of our fallen world, depression is in fact the appropriate response to existing. To me, this exceeds a simple acknowledgement that negative emotions are a natural part of the human process of which we are all privy and must contend with, and I have a few notable concerns. If you assign the state of the world an agency that allows it to have domain over your emotional states, you are in dangerous territory, particularly if that world has been described to you as inherently broken. More so troubling if the mechanism utilized to quell that emotional state is an appeal to an ultimate escape to another, further world where that pain will be negated for you. What you attribute those feelings to becomes intrinsically external and in some instances now inescapable, because by this logic, the world can be no other way. You can inhabit no space that doesn't adhere to these predetermined qualities. If you are on a darker path, grappling with situational depressive thoughts, that justification of causation may not be accurate and could serve as reinforcement. Another item that I would like to briefly address here is that of guilt. Here, Dr. Pierre alludes to the guilt that one may feel for feeling depressive or negative thoughts at all when God so loves them. While I agree with Dr. Pierre that feelings of guilt are never founded for simply experiencing emotional states, his solution creates a paradox that allows depressive thoughts to be unilaterally expected and, in fact, be almost an obligatory default. What rationalization or therapeutic affect could conceivably assist someone in the face of the message that the entire world is irreparably broken? It's your fault because you're intrinsically flawed, and this state is temporary. The suffering that you should expect to feel is justified because there's something better for you, so just hold on.
With depression, it's just helpful to ask yourself the question, what am I hoping in, or what was I hoping in that has failed me? Identify what it is. And then, as we saw in Romans chapter 8, you then have to challenge yourself to think carefully about what God says about a greater and wider hope. So, whatever ways this broken world has failed you, there's a wider world, there's a larger world, there's a permanent world that's coming that will not fail you. And if you believe that, then that belief, that faith streaks through the failures of all those other hopes, and it carries you along. So it's not the avoidance of all negative depressive feelings, But what it is that keeps negative depressive feelings from taking over and hardening and characterizing the entirety of your experience of this world and of this life, because God has a greater world and a greater life that He's promised you.
So again, as a professional counselor, his ambiguity in terminology here is exceptionally troubling. Were I someone who legitimately experiences clinical depression, it wouldn't in any way be clear to me that he wasn't referencing my experiences. And were I to take advice to heart in that situation, it could lead me to really dangerous and detrimental places. So let's be generous here and assume that he's referencing the ebb of natural emotional states in the human experience. With that lens, let's analyze what he just said. He's challenged you to address what expectation has failed you, leading you to feel negative emotional affect. And what tools has he armed you with to exist today with a trajectory towards betterment so that you can effectively cope with and process those feelings in a healthy and productive fashion that will arm you with ultimately better emotional recognition and introspection skills. God has something better for you after you die. There will be a better world after this one. So wait. Perhaps this thought may have artificial, temporary comfort, but it's not an effective strategy for grappling with and effectively mitigating negative emotions. It isn't a strategy to recognize their causes or address their implications. For the sake of argument, let's grant that God will usher you into a better place where there is no pain once this life has ended. How does the acknowledgement of this hypothetical inevitability arm anyone with the emotional aptitude to identify, isolate, contemplate, and address emotional traumas, situational or otherwise, in the present?
There are physiological elements that we need to recognize. Sometimes the cycles of depressed emotions and the cycle of thinking that goes along with that can be so ingrained that there's some physiological element that's contributing to the overall experience. And we should have medical attention when that's the case. But to go back to the original question as it was phrased, can a true Christian be depressed? The answer is yes.
Based on the title of your video, that is not the original question as it was phrased. If that was clickbait, then shame on you. Who are you baiting? This is also a wholly false characterization and summarization of clinical depression. It is not a physiological state brought on by a cycle of emotion. It is a neurochemical imbalance that is contributed to by a multitude of factors: heredity, potential drug use, severe situational trauma, amongst a myriad of other influences, indicating that one can simply enter a natural cycle of negative thought that elicits clinical depression may be the most dangerous thing that he has said here. From the onset of this video, there was an obfuscation that didn't clearly define the context Dr. Pierre was referencing. The title of the video itself gave the direct implication that depression in the clinical sense is being discussed. And when, as an afterthought, the concept of clinical depression is addressed, it is misrepresented as an ingrained continuation from a natural emotional spectrum that we all experience day to day. I would implore anybody who is watching this, Christian or otherwise, to carefully consider the messages that are being delivered here. Please, if you have lingering or pervasive feelings of depression that become overwhelming, or if you're concerned that you may, seek appropriate professional therapeutic assistance. The answer to the question, can a Christian be depressed, is yes. The answer to the question, can a Christian have depression, is yes as well. It's the same answer for anyone. But the solution isn't recognizing that it's your natural state of existence or looking forward to the day that you can escape it. It's learning effective coping strategies, finding emotional support, and identifying the cause. Be good to yourself. I care about you. And others do as well. And we want you to live a better life now. You don't have to wait. There's a better way. Negative emotions, fuck, my phone beeped. Fucking stupid and everything's stupid. Travel through life. Fucking phone. Mute. Drink. Every time my phone goes off, we drink. Coping strategies. Finding, I swear to God. Edit on the fly. What you attribute those feelings to becomes intrinsically external. I swear to fuck. That one's my email. Someone subscribed to my channel. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your subscription. Oh, it's awful. Oh my goodness. Thanks. I shouldn't have been annoyed by that. Thank you everybody for watching, and a special thanks to Suris the Skeptic for introducing me to this video. There's a link to Suris's channel below, as well as the podcast that I appeared on with him and Ocean Keltoy. If you'd like to check them out, please go like and subscribe. They're great. I've also started a Discord server where you can come and join me on my monthly voice chats. There's a great community forming there if you'd like to come in and have a conversation. It's also a great place where you can make video and guest suggestions for the channel. And as always, thank you so much to my patrons who help me improve this channel every day. You are all amazing. There are links below, as always, to resources if you need them. Please click on them. And as always, help elevate the discourse.